We were sent to map a tunnel network deep in the mountains of North Korea. But what we found down there wasn't part of any mission brief. It wasn't on any map, and it sure as hell wasn't supposed to be real. There were things in those tunnels that shouldn't exist, things we were never meant to encounter. I wish I could unsee it, but I can't. Our orders were simple, but nothing about that night was normal. I am Sergeant Name, part of a joint US-South Korean task force. It was 2013, and we were stationed along the DMZ near the northern border of North Korea. We'd been in worse places before, sure, but this one felt different. The atmosphere was wrong from the start. The mission, a basic reconnaissance operation, the kind we'd been through 100 times before. Operation Ghost, they called it. We were to identify and map a series of tunnels, rumored to be part of an old Cold War network. Simple enough, just find the entrances, mark them, and report back. At least, that's what we were told. I remember the briefing like it was yesterday. We gathered in a cold, sterile room, concrete walls, the hum of fluorescent lights above. Major Peterson was at the front, running through the usual pre-mission checklist. He wasn't nervous, but there was something in his eyes, a kind of edge that you don't forget. His eyes darted around, never settling on one person for too long. The intel was sparse, too sparse. It was a red flag, but we weren't allowed to ask too many questions. The North Koreans have been using the tunnels for years. No need for us to poke the hornet's nest, Peterson had said. But we need to know what's down there. No one's sure what they are hiding. We'd been given satellite images of the area, but the details were vague. The maps were outdated and the coordinates didn't quite match up. One thing, though, stood out. Near the main tunnel entrance, there was a patch on the map marked unconfirmed. It was shaded in black, no details, no other markings. That wasn't supposed to be there. Not in a mission this routine. I had a bad feeling about it right away. When I asked about it later, Peterson just told me to focus on the mission, and that was that. But even then, it didn't sit right with me. The eerie part came when we were heading out. As we suited up, the South Korean interpreter, Reynolds, pulled me aside. His face was pale and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. He grabbed my arm and muttered something in Korean, something I couldn't quite catch. "The eyes in the dark," he whispered, voice shaking. I didn't know what he meant, but it didn't help calm my nerves. I thought it was just pre-mission stress. I thought I was just overthinking it. But the deeper we went into the mountains, the less I was sure of that. But that was only the beginning. The convoy left base at dusk, the cold wind already biting at our faces as we rolled out. It was a familiar feeling, just another mission. Our vehicles kicked up dust on the narrow mountain roads as we headed deeper into the Northern Territory. I was riding shotgun in one of the trucks, watching the terrain roll by. The mountains here were jagged, unforgiving, the kind of place where nothing should be alive, yet somehow it all looked too quiet. But we'd been through this before. We weren't supposed to question anything. Everything was standard procedure. The radios buzzed with chatter, soldiers joking about the long drive and speculating on the tunnels, how we were just going in to get a few pictures, a few notes, and come back with a fresh batch of intel. But I could tell no one was really in the mood to joke. We were all trying to act normal, keep our minds on the mission. But I wasn't the only one who felt that something was off. We passed a few scattered villages along the way, little pockets of life nestled between the mountains. But as we got closer to the target area, the silence started to feel more and more unnatural. I could feel the air change, like it wasn't just the temperature dropping. The further we went, the fewer people we saw. No children playing outside, no animals, nothing. As we entered the village closest to the target zone, something didn't sit right with me. The houses were quiet, too quiet. I remember seeing a few locals standing near their homes, watching us as we passed. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow, like they hadn't slept in days. They didn't wave, didn't greet us, just stared. It was the kind of look that made you feel like you were invading a place you weren't supposed to be. "Something's off," I said to Reynolds, who was sitting next to me in the truck. He glanced out the window, then back at me, his eyes narrowed. "They know what we're here for." But that wasn't it. It wasn't just the locals being wary. Something else was wrong. We passed by a barn and there was no sound at all. No clucking chickens, no barking dogs. The animals were gone, like they'd just disappeared. Reynolds made a comment about how that wasn't unusual in a place like this. Sometimes they leave for the mountains, he said, but I wasn't buying it. The silence felt like it was pressing in on us, like the whole place was holding its breath, waiting for something. The convoy pressed on, and after a while the village was behind us. Still, that eerie stillness clung to the air. The mountains felt like they were closing in on us. The higher we climbed, the more I felt like we were being drawn into something that we weren't meant to find. We stopped for a quick break before moving into the final stretch. Everyone got out of the vehicles, stretched their legs, checked their gear, standard stuff. But even as we did that, something about the place made me uneasy. My radio flickered briefly, a few crackles on the frequency that I couldn't explain. It wasn't just the usual static from the mountains. This was different, more like a hum, a low frequency that vibrated in your chest. I checked the comms, but everything seemed normal. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. We continued on, deeper into the heart of the mountains. As we neared the coordinates, we saw the entrance to the first tunnel, a massive hole in the side of a cliff. It wasn't the kind of tunnel I'd expected, not like the ones you see in old photos. This one looked wrong. The air around it was colder, like a draft was coming from inside, pulling at the trees, the plants. It felt unnatural. And then the silence hit. The sound of the wind in the trees, the distant rumble of our vehicles, all of it stopped. Suddenly, everything was still. The whole mountain was holding its breath. "Stop the convoy," Peterson ordered. He was standing at the front of the line, staring up at the entrance. "Get the drones in the air. Let's get some eyes on the area first." We fell into routine, setting up the perimeter. The drones went up. We made our way to the tunnel's entrance, scanning the area with thermal and night vision. Nothing. No heat signatures, no movement. Just the oppressive quiet, thicker now, heavier. I caught Reynolds watching the tunnel, his eyes wide. That's when we reached the site and everything changed. The moment we stepped out of the convoy and onto the dirt near the tunnel entrance, something didn't sit right. It wasn't the cold. This place was always cold, and we were used to that. No, it was the way the air felt. Heavier, somehow, like it was thicker than it should be. The usual mountain breeze was absent, replaced by a silence so deep it felt almost suffocating. We were used to the wind, the usual sound of life in the mountains, birds, insects, maybe even the distant growl of a wild animal. But here, nothing. It was as if the world had just stopped. I tried to shake off the feeling. Maybe it was the place, the tension of the mission. Maybe it was just the quiet. But the deeper we went into that site, the more I realized it wasn't just in my head. As we neared the entrance to the tunnel, I noticed something on the ground, a series of strange footprints, fresh but unlike any tracks I'd ever seen. They were large, too large to be human, and they had a strange, almost dragging shape to them. At first, I thought they were just an animal's, maybe a bear, but the way the dirt around them was disturbed didn't match anything I'd seen before. It looked like something heavy had been dragged along the ground, its weight shifting with each step. There was no consistency in the depth of the prints, which only made it more unsettling. I bent down to inspect them. The soil was still disturbed, fresh, but there was something wrong with the way the ground seemed to have been displaced. It didn't make sense, like whatever left these marks wasn't walking. It was dragging itself, something that felt wrong. "Hey, check this out," I said, pointing it out to the nearest guys. MC Cree walked over, squatted beside me, and frowned. "Looks like something was dragged through here," he said, voice low. "But that's not possible. No way something that big could have moved through these rocks without leaving a bigger mess." That's when I started to feel it, the first real sense that we weren't alone. It was like the air was pressing down on us, making it harder to breathe, like something in the earth itself didn't want us there. We moved on, and as we got closer to the entrance, the temperature dropped. It wasn't the usual mountain chill that you could adjust to. This felt like stepping into a freezer. I pulled my jacket tighter, tried to ignore the prickling on the back of my neck, but the cold, it was unnatural, like it was coming from the tunnel itself. "Everything all right?" Reynolds asked, walking beside me. I nodded but didn't speak. Something wasn't right. Not just the temperature, not just the footprints. Something about the place felt wrong. The silence, the way the air seemed too still, was unlike anything ID experienced in the field. We reached the tunnel's entrance, the massive dark opening in the cliff face swallowing all the light around it. I could barely make out the edges of it, even with my night vision on. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as we stood there, staring at it. I felt the unease spreading through the team, but no one said a word. We all knew. We were all thinking the same thing. Whatever was down there, it wasn't supposed to be. I motioned for the team to spread out and secure the perimeter, trying to keep us moving with a sense of purpose. We went about it like we had on any other mission. Routine. Step 1, check the entrance for traps. Step 2, get the drones up. Step 3, make sure we're not walking into a setup. As I approached the edge of the tunnel, something caught my eye. Symbols, etched into the stone just above the entrance. They were old, faded, and crude, like someone had carved them by hand with a primitive tool. I wasn't a historian, but I could tell these weren't modern. They were too ancient-looking, too foreign. They looked almost like runes, spiraling into one another, but I couldn't place them. No one could. "Anyone know what these are?" I asked, but the rest of the team just shook their heads. They looked as confused as I felt. Probably some kind of old marker. "Nothing to worry about," MC Cree said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. His eyes kept darting back to the tunnel. Then, as we moved further into the site, I found something else. Bones. Not animal bones either. Human bones. They were scattered near the entrance, half buried in the dirt, like someone had left them there in haste. It was like a warning, the kind you'd see in an old horror story. I'm not saying it made me panic, but it sure as hell made me uncomfortable. Who the hell would leave bones like this? I muttered to myself. "That's not good," Reynolds said, his voice tight. He looked down at the bones and then quickly away, like he couldn't stomach it any longer. I motioned for everyone to get back. The feeling that something was wrong, something we couldn't see, kept getting stronger. But we didn't have a choice. We had to go in. We had to finish the mission. But that was just the beginning. We were just starting to settle into our routine around the tunnel entrance when it happened. Up until that point, everything had been tense, sure, but still within the realm of the usual, unusual footprints, strange symbols, a few animal bones. But as we set up, checking gear and positioning, it all shifted. That's when it became clear that this mission wasn't about gathering intel anymore. It was about surviving. It started with a sound, low at first, almost imperceptible. At first, I thought it was the wind. Maybe it was the tunnel's draft messing with the atmosphere, making it echo strangely. But then it came again, a faint, almost musical hum, like a distant whisper threading its way through the stone. It wasn't natural. It wasn't the wind. It was like the tunnel itself was calling us. I looked at the rest of the team. They'd heard it too. MC Cree's hand went to his rifle, but he didn't say anything. Reynolds was the first to speak, his voice shaky. "Did anyone else hear that?" I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The noise was getting louder, vibrating in my chest, and I wasn't sure if it was in my head or coming from somewhere in the tunnel. Every instinct I had as a soldier was screaming at me to pull back, to get out of there. But we couldn't. Not yet. I signaled for the team to stay alert, ordered the drones to start scanning the tunnel again. We weren't. About to go in blind. But as I checked my equipment, my radio buzzed with static. It wasn't the usual crackle from the mountains. This was something different. The static was deep, pulsating, as though something was interfering with the signal. "Cut the radio," Peterson barked. "Check the comms." I did as ordered, adjusting the frequencies, but nothing worked. The static kept growing, the hum still there, filling the space between us. It felt like the world around us was shutting down. The closer I got to the tunnel, the worse it became. It was as if the walls themselves were vibrating, radiating something, a presence. I couldn't put it into words. The feeling pressed down on my chest, the air growing thick and hard to breathe. We tried to move forward. It was standard protocol, check the tunnel, map it, gather intel, but there was no logic in the way things were playing out. We were soldiers, trained for all kinds of operations, but this felt beyond us. It was like Wed stepped into something we weren't supposed to, and now it was waiting for us to make the wrong move. I looked over at Reynolds. His eyes were wide, his hands trembling as he adjusted his gear. He looked like he was on the edge of a breakdown. I don't think we should go in, he said, his voice quiet almost to himself. This isn't normal. It's not right. I saw the panic in his face, something I'd never seen from him before. He was usually the calmest among us, always composed. But now he looked like he had seen a ghost. And I couldn't blame him. We all felt it. I stepped forward, tried to push the doubt aside. I couldn't let the team break. We stay on mission, keep moving. But even as I said it, I knew I was lying to myself. I wasn't sure what the hell was going on, but it was becoming more than just a feeling. It was like the ground was moving under our feet. The hum had turned into a low, guttural growl, a sound that seemed to come from the tunnel itself. It was pulling at us, pulling me in, like the darkness was alive, waiting to swallow us whole. Then came the real shock. A shadow shifted in the entrance of the tunnel. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, but then it moved. It was fast, too fast for any human, darting just out of view, but I saw it. A shape, tall and twisted, too long and wrong to be anything natural. It was there for a second, just long enough for me to see the outline, just long enough to make my heart stop in my chest. I raised my rifle, instinct kicking in, but Peterson held up his hand. Hold fire. Everyone stood frozen. No one spoke. No one breathed. And then the growl came again. This time it was louder, almost deafening. The noise seemed to come from everywhere, reverberating off the stone walls of the tunnel. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't anything we'd ever trained for. This wasn't a mission. It was a warning. I motioned for the team to pull back, but the ground beneath our feet shifted again. Something was coming closer. I could feel it. The air around us felt charged, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I looked around at the men. Some of them were still processing what they had just seen. I could see the doubt in their eyes, the fear creeping in. No one wanted to admit it, but we were all thinking the same thing. Whatever was in that tunnel, it wasn't human. It wasn't supposed to be real. And that's when everything changed. We should have never moved forward. But in that moment, with the pressure of the mission and the uncertainty of what we'd seen, we did. We kept pushing, like we were still in control. We were soldiers, after all. We were supposed to handle this, but we weren't prepared for what happened next. We reached the edge of the tunnel, our footsteps heavy against the cold stone floor. The growl had subsided for a moment, replaced by a deafening silence. My hand was on my rifle, but even with the adrenaline coursing through me, I couldn't shake the feeling that the air around us was thick, charged somehow with something ancient and powerful. It felt like something was watching us. And then it appeared. A shadow, a blur at first, just beyond the edge of our flashlights. But as it moved closer, I could see it clearer. A figure, impossibly tall, its limbs elongated, its movements jerky and unnatural, like it was shifting between spaces. I barely had time to react before it was on us. The first scream came from Jackson. He was the closest, standing near the entrance, and the thing, whatever it was, moved toward him with a speed I couldn't even track. The rest of us opened fire, our rounds useless. They hit the thing, but it didn't stop. It didn't flinch. It was like our bullets were nothing more than rain on a stone. I shouted for the team to fall back, but we were already surrounded. The growl returned, louder now, as if the walls themselves were alive, vibrating in time with the creature's movements. We tried to retreat, but the tunnel felt different now, like it had become a trap, closing in around us. The thing moved with unnatural speed, its body twisting and shifting, and every time we turned to fire, it was already behind us. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowed faintly, a deep, unnatural red, like they were the only thing alive in this dead place. In that moment, we realized we weren't fighting a creature. We were fighting something older, something tied to the very earth beneath our feet. The thing wasn't just alive, it was a force, a supernatural force, something that shouldn't exist. And that's when everything changed. We didn't stand a chance. The second that thing attacked, everything fell apart. We retreated. We had no other choice. I was the last one to get out of the tunnel, my mind racing, adrenaline surging, but I couldn't stop thinking about the others. Jackson was gone, his body slammed against the wall, lifeless. The others weren't much better. MC Cree had a deep gash across his arm, bleeding heavily. Reynolds had gone silent after the thing slashed him across the chest. His shirt was soaked in red. It was a mess. We made it outside, but the firefight didn't stop. The thing didn't stop. It followed us, its growls reverberating through the air, a constant presence like a nightmare we couldn't shake. But eventually, we got far enough away. We had a moment of brief silence, and the reality of what had happened started to settle in. We regrouped, trying to catch our breath. Peterson, usually so composed, looked like a shell of a man. His face was pale, his eyes wide, and he wasn't even trying to cover it up. The whole team was rattled, scared shitless. No one spoke at first. We were all too focused on the sounds around us, the growls still echoing in the distance, the air still thick with dread. We tried to contact the command, but the radios were dead. The comms were useless. Nothing we did could make contact. And that's when we realized we were on our own. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but in reality it was only a few minutes. When we finally made it back to base, the aftermath was worse than ID imagined. Command was in disbelief. They didn't want to hear about the creature we encountered, the thing that nearly wiped us out. They didn't want to hear about the tunnel or the horrors we saw. They said it was a freak accident, that we'd misinterpreted what we saw. They'd written us off as spooked, overreacting. They sealed the files, locked them away. They buried it. But what happened next took things to another level. I know what you are thinking. That what I've said sounds impossible. That it's some kind of bad dream or maybe an exaggeration. I wish it was. I wish I could say it was just a nightmare that we all woke up from. But I can't. There's something out there. Something that shouldn't be. It's still down there, somewhere in those tunnels, waiting. I don't know what it is, and I don't think I ever want to know. All I know is that it's real. And if you ever hear about a mission gone wrong, a team that never came back, think about this. Whatever that thing was, it's still out there. And maybe, just maybe, it's waiting for the next team to make the same mistake we did.